All right, welcome back to another episode of Wholly Unapologetic. I am your host here, Marcus, today. Ace is not with us. He's doing a bunch of cool events and things, but we have a really wonderful guest today, Mattie Jo Cowsert. Thank you so much for being here today. You are actually in New York City right now. Is that true?
I am. I'm in
Okay,
Brooklyn. So, depending on who you ask, it's
right.
not New York if it's not Manhattan, but it's definitely New York.
I am in LA County, but I am in Long Beach. So for the locals, I am across the universe, but I say I'm
hmm
in LA, depending on who asks. But I love it.
hmm
We will of course dive into your book, but it is like any good New York story. It feels like a character, so it seems even just exciting to be like
Yes.
you're actually there where it all happens. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here. Yeah, I feel like we've already spent so much time together in this sort of parasocial way because I listened to your audiobook. So thank you for recording your own story. I love hearing from the author, but I feel like we've just been hanging out for a couple of weeks. So we'll actually get to know each other a little better here. But I
Yes.
loved listening to your story. We have a lot more in common than it may seem like on the surface. We are both I'm a trans man, but I was a young woman growing up in purity culture in
hmm
this American Christian machine. My dad was and also is a pastor, so we have that
Oh
big one in
my
common.
gosh.
I was one with the theater people as well. The only main divergent point is the New York dream versus LA. So I feel like in a
hmm
parallel universe, we might have had even more similar stories. But I
hmm
want to dive into yours. Um, so I guess first and foremost, what helped you kind of decide to start the book, and where do you end it? Because you have this great line at the end of your book where you're like, "I'm wrapping this thing up, and this is just the beginning of my story." So what was
Yeah.
kind of the beginning, and helped you kind of know where? Because I also think I would love to write a book someday, but it's like
hmm
purity culture experience in American Christianity. Where do you even begin? And you have
Right.
this wonderful finished thing. So I would love to hear about kind of your process with that.
Yeah. Surprisingly, I feel like my book is very much like a solid beginning, middle, and end. It's like a three-act play, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I am not a person that writes very well with bullet points. Like I had
Mm.
gotten advice from a creative coach to, you know, set the pillars and the bullet points up and then let the stories follow that. It never worked for me. I basically think in story or topic. So if the topic
Mm.
is this, and then I can riff, and then I can go back and finesse and say, okay, this is a detail we don't need, this is a detail we don't need. um but I think more in, yeah, topic and story. So I knew the stories that I wanted, and I knew that I wanted to include. And because I had been writing a blog, so I think that's a
Right.
pretty big detail. I had been writing a blog since 2015 by the same title, God, Sex, and Rich People. So I had these stories that I had already sort of put out in, like, 1,500 word essay
Mm-hmm.
versions. But I had become a much better writer over the years. And I knew I wanted, I never set out to write a book. It was just as the blog was gaining more traction and whatnot, people were like, you have to write a book, you have to write a book. And that just felt like the next right step,
Mm-hmm.
career creatively, I guess. And
Sure.
yeah, and then it became a goal of mine. So yeah, I just sort of was like, okay, I really wanted to dive into the details of my early days in in Missouri and in evangelicalism, and go into my experience in mission work and college, and my relationship that I had that really then catapulted me into New York City. Um, and yeah, and I worked with my editor a lot on this because I wanted this book to be so many things, and she just kept being like, you can't fit this all in one book. It's
Yeah.
already a stretch to convince people to read a book about someone they don't know, especially if it's a
Mm-hmm.
memoir.
Mm-hmm.
Memoirs really only sell well if it's like super salacious, like Primates of the Upper East Side or whatever it's called, or if they're celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
So hard to sell a memoir already, and then on top of that, you're definitely not going to get people to read a memoir that's like 500 pages, right? So you kind of have to dial in. And for
Yeah.
me, I just, as I was writing the book, and as the stories were flowing, and and the page count was increasing, I was like, okay, I have to end it here, even though there's so much more that happens
Yeah.
after that, because I say, like, I have, not to spoil the ending, but it's like, that's only just sort of like the foundation of
Yeah.
my deconstruction is the book. And then there's this whole other layer that happens because Donald Trump was elected and evangelicalism really becomes part of the mainstream vernacular in a way that it
Yeah.
just wasn't when I was
Right.
going through the kind of the foundation of my deconstruction. And then also I'm sorry, this is trigger warning to your audience and kind of a big ball to drop, but I was date raped like a couple of days after Donald Trump was elected. So I thought I had done all of this work, and then I, I was getting tested for HIV and I was reaching out to Planned Parenthood. And then this whole other thing happened where like Planned Parenthood saved my life. And then I got connected with a sexual trauma therapist. And then in sexual trauma therapy, I realized, wow, there's a lot of minutia of this that I haven't even, I've just barely scratched the surface. And at that time, therapy wasn't cool. So like I was really like averse to it. And so all of this other stuff happened, but that couldn't fit in this book. That had to be something else entirely. Maybe it's another book at some point. Maybe it's a set of fictional adaptations of things that happened via Substack essays or whatever, but it just wasn't that was just too much to tackle in one book. So does that very long-winded answer your question?
It's a very difficult thing to catch, which is how to even dial this in. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I loved your book. It was very accessible. It was very enjoyable. It does in some ways feel like this kind of light rom-com in New York City, which is very fun. But at the same time, you're talking about all these very important things. I felt like the image that kept coming to my head was like each story was like one block pulled out of the Jenga tower. And so in terms of deconstruction, it's like every story had a purpose. You could see where it was like, but then I had this conversation with somebody. It was like, wait a second. And so I love that. I was like, this is such a good structure for it, because I don't really know how to write. And this is something we'll kind of talk about too, relation to your comedy, but like, I don't know how to write for the person I was 10 years ago. I know how to, and then another thing too, that was so great is you talked about how like, once you deconstructed, you then wanted to tell everyone about that. And this kind of proselytizing thing continues. I totally get that too. So I'm very interested in like, how do we write something for the person, like the breadcrumbs for the person that needed it back then, versus now we tend to be in our deconstruction communities and we can kind of laugh about it all and be post this thing. So I've just found it incredibly accessible, but also to know that each of these stories had an important purpose. But yeah, that is such a tough one. It's, politics and women's rights and all these other things and healthcare. And I totally understand, I relate to that part of your story too. My mom was one of those people that was always pushing to defund Planned Parenthood and fund the other Christian thing. And Planned Parenthood's where I went when I was raped. And so when I needed to be tested, when I needed to get on, when I needed to get on birth control that I didn't want to get on, because I was also starting to kind of come to terms with my own sexuality. And I was like, well, I don't really I would much rather start dating women, but I also know I'm still at risk in this way. And then it did happen again. And so all these kind of heartbreaking things, but so much of that purity culture goes hand in hand with rape culture. And so that's,
I think you can't
so
talk about one without talking about the other. Like, who I don't know who originally said it. Maybe it was Linda K. Klein. I don't want to quote her if it's not attributed to her, but I think she said like, purity culture is rape culture. It is an incubator for abuse. And so it is really hard to talk about these things without they go hand in hand, which is a lot of people gave me the suggestion to structure my book, God, Sex, and Rich People. And I was like, I can't.
You can't separate them.
Interwoven in terms of my story. And actually, I would have loved to include more about the rich people. I included it as much as I could, sort of as like the backdrop and the setting. But I was working for billionaires at the time, and I was really trying not to lose my job. And then I lost my job anyway, so I should have just written
I could have really gotten it.
That's a whole other story. But yeah, and I just finished, I'm rewatching Girls right now because I'm sort of like an unashamed fan of Lena Dunham. She just has this, I know she's so controversial and polarizing, but I think like that's what that's what you're signing up for when you are
Yeah.
the kind of person
A
she
woman with
is.
opinions.
Yes. And anyway, it was that episode that like lives with me. It's in the final season where she's talking to that famous author who has been accused of sexual assault. It's, I think, one of the most masterful pieces of television. And anyway, he says, "What do you want?" And she says, "I want to write stories that make people feel less alone, and I want to make people laugh about the things that are painful in life." And that, I remember hearing that when I was like 26, and I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm trying to do with God, Sex, and Rich People, And so that's kind of the dance I'm always doing with myself, is like, I want it to be accessible, and I want to laugh at the hard stuff without losing the gravity of how heavy this shit is. So yeah, that dance that I kind of am always doing with myself as I write.
That's a really tough one. I feel like I could go into so many other things too, because I watched your, how would you describe the YouTube video that you made? I know I'm jumping around a bit, but what is kind of the terminology you'd want to use for that?
I call it the proof of concept. If you want to tack on of the pilot, but that's a little bit wordy. But yeah, I would say it's the proof of concept of the TV show, is what I want. It's like, and I think maybe the proof of concept got a little heavier than I wanted it to be. I wanted there to be a little bit more gravity, but it is kind of caricature-y with the beginning. And if we have when we have a bigger budget, right, we can, like, the full version of that scene at the beginning, it's like a full chorus of people. It's like the youth pastor and the small group leader and the mom and the dad, and there's like tomato juice shooting across the bed, and it's like very cartoonish, so I think I'll be able to accomplish more of the comedy with a bigger budget. But I would call it a proof of concept. I say the way I describe the TV show is like, it's the uncomfortable, it's the hilarity in, what do I say, the hilarity of oh my God, I've practiced this so many times. I've said it so many times. Anyway, it's Broad City meets Girls meets Younger. That's the TV show. That's the vision for the TV show. So I would say what is up on the YouTubes is the proof of concept.
I love that. And I think that's so important too, as like an artist, to just be making stuff all the time and try to put it forward. Like I ended up, I started off as kind of the actor dream, and I still will probably do some of it some days, but I really found writing to be much more of my passion. And so it's easy for me to kind of hide in my office here and create my stories. But I do want to have the bravery to be like, okay, we're going to pick a scene from this thing, and we're going to go and we're going to make it. So I love that you did that. I think that's really cool. We can link it for people to watch as well.
Yes.
And too, as I was finishing your book, I was like, oh, I really want to adapt this. And I was like, oh, darn, she's already working on it. Okay, well, that's great. I'm really glad. It should be adapted. It would be so good as a TV show for sure. But I think just in watching that video, you have the guy character, and it is kind of like a cartoony interaction. And there was like two different sides of me warring on it, because part of me wanted him to be, I guess, a little bit more, I don't want to say realistic, because there are plenty of guys like that, but I also think it sort of softens the, like, he's got that golden retriever energy. So it's kind of like, well, there's this harmless thing. And there's also like, these men aren't harmless either, but they're also raised to, like, in a lot of ways that are really shitty and kind of can lead into these relationships and taking advantage of women. We'll get into a story, pressuring women, that I really hate. And so I was kind of also coming at it with all of my own anger at, men in relationships and how much they pressure young women. But I also know that you want to make something that's enjoyable and it's fun, and you don't want to make it so that it's like, men are the worst. And like, so I was kind of, as I was watching, I was kind of like, well, how would, that's a really difficult line to draw, because you want him to seem like a human being, as these men are, but you're also trying to talk about something really difficult. So it got my wheels turning a lot in terms of how to kind of
and you've read the book, so know that so much of that dialogue did happen.
I know,
that is true, and But oh god, Charlie, he crushed that. I want him to be that character in the show.
Yeah.
Charlie McElveen, what a dream, what a dreamboat.
Yeah. And
And
it's true. It's like none of these men think that they're villains. They're just out doing
no,
their thing and they're trying to find
no,
happiness in their own way. But they don't, I think, realize how much like women are calculating 1,000 things in the background. And then also, dealing with shame after that they're just not having to deal with in the same way.
mm-mm,
And you have this great
no,
line that I love. I don't think I wrote down the entire thing, but it was this quote about how like, there's no way I could just leave this encounter and be like, okay, I'm going to do something differently next time. I had to really feel the weight of my sin. I had to punish
yeah.
myself. I had to like wear it a little bit longer. And it was just so, I should have wrote it down. I apologize.
Yeah,
But
no, I know what
that
you're talking
was
about. That's after I bareback fucked my boss's nephew.
that one.
You
But you even
know?
have a, you have a great like tease in your video too about like, the plan B and
Yeah.
you talk about that too in terms like, so in a way it was almost kind of surprising to hear your story and how you don't have kind of the, like, you weren't using protection and things like that. So it's like scandal,
Yeah.
but also I'm like, yeah, but we aren't taught any of that stuff.
No.
And you have this line about how like, well, if I actually have to get on like birth control, that means I'm actually a slut, sort of like I've
Yeah.
actually that
Yeah.
it's real,
Mhm.
versus this kind of short term fix.
Right.
And I can just so relate to that too, because I wasn't on birth control because I wasn't planning on having, sex at that time. And, but then it happened and,
Yeah.
non-consensually in many cases. And so I went and I got the plan B and I'm grateful that it was accessible where I live and all this
Mhm.
stuff. But we don't, it's like the study that shows that like sex ed prevents abortions. And
Yeah.
yet the
Yeah.
Christians that are anti-abortion are saying no sex ed, abstinence only. It's
Right.
like, this doesn't
Abstinence
work as
only.
well for the outcome that you want.
Like statistics don't matter. They're
Yeah.
just because it's not actually about what they're saying it's about, right? It's not
Right.
about the babies. It's about
Yeah.
political power and yeah.
So it's all connected. So it's like, where do we
Yeah.
even jump in, right?
Right.
But let's see. So do you want to give any more of, because I know you wanted to talk about kind of the background in evangelicalism, high level overview of getting to New York City. I know I'm kind of talking from a place of having read your whole story, but is there any of that kind of I don't want to say spiel, that makes it sound so cheesy, but any of that kind of overview you want to give? Because one thing we like doing on this podcast, I've been kind of leading into it saying it's like the worst icebreaker to say, tell me about yourself. But
Yeah.
as people familiar with transformation will tend to have very different answers each time. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself for those that might not have yet read your book?
Yeah. So I'll do my little like practiced pitch,
Great.
and then I can kind of dive in a little bit more. But so I was a pastor's kid in proud purity ring wearer, born and raised in rural Missouri. I like to say my family was like equal parts seventh heaven and winter's bone. And I practiced a faith that was very important and very personal to me, until I moved to New York City in my early 20s to become an actor instead of becoming a wife like I was supposed to. And my entire identity imploded thanks to Tinder and my Jewish roommate. All of my secular world experiences culminated to force me to question my faith, reinvent my sexuality. At this point in the visual pitch, there's a picture of Taye Diggs touching my head. And I'm
wow.
which is the only, you can only transform your sexuality after
you've
been touched by Taye Diggs.
Yeah, that changes everything. Like everyone should give it a pass for
everything.
There's before Taye Diggs touches your
Yeah,
head, and then there's
I was like,
Taye
I
Diggs
sent that picture to my sister, and she was like, "You could do nothing else for the rest of your life, and you have made it. Taye Diggs has touched your head."
Yeah, yeah. It's like they think New York is turning our kids gay or whatever, right. But it's like no, it's more nuanced than that.
Yes. Yes. So all of my secular world experiences culminated to force me to question my faith, reinvent my sexuality, all while living with and working for the 1%. So rich people were this very strange and unexpected container for my identity crisis. And it was culture shock from every possible angle. So like a good millennial white woman, I decided to write about it on the internet. And in 2015, when marriage equality passed, I wrote my first blog entitled God and the Gays. And all about how the queer community was a catalyst for me questioning everything I'd been taught about this Jesus guy. And then from there, people seemed to really resonate with the story. So I just kept writing. It was kind of a creative outlet that I didn't have when I was in the throes of auditioning for commercial musical theater, because something they don't tell you in school is commercial musical theater is not that creative. You walk in and you do exactly what is rehearsed, and you step into the role of somebody else. They already have an idea of what you need to look like. Like, artistic directors actually have no artistic direction. They're just emulating and repeating something that's already been done. So I didn't feel very creative in pursuing musical theater. And so writing gave me this outlet to be creative. But I also wasn't like precious about it, because I didn't see myself as a writer. But anyway, so people seemed to really resonate. So I kept writing, and this was before the age of like going viral and all of that. So I had a pretty decent readership before the pandemic. And then that's when everything turned to video, turned to reels, turned to Substack. And I was doing everything on my own on like a blog spot, on like Google Blog Spot. So anyways, and so I say, from purity rings to sex with pop stars and learning not to hate myself, I shared the raw, honest, sometimes painful, sometimes hilarious realities of figuring out faith, fucking, and the 1%. Thus, God, Sex, and Rich People was born. And just really quickly about like sort of my specific background in evangelicalism. My dad, I say in the book, like, my roots in evangelicalism are as deep as my roots in America, because both of my great grandfathers were Baptist pastors. And then both of my grandfathers were Baptist pastors. And then my dad was a Baptist pastor. My mom was a preacher's kid. Like, they met and, had all four of us kids while they were attending a Baptist college, like very, very Baptist. But then my dad left the Baptist denomination when I was going into junior high, and we joined a non-denominational congregation. And so the biggest influence of like sort of my faith practice and identity was in the sort of like Hillsong United, Willow Creek vibes, right? Like, very approachable, all seeker friendly, great music, lots of spinny lights. The sanctuary is also a gym, all of that. That's sort of the version of Christianity I got. And I know a lot of people got it much more strict. Like, they weren't even allowed to listen to Christian pop music or anything like that. That wasn't my experience. But I still got what I say in the book is same song, different choir robes. Like, it's all the same messaging. It's just sort of dressed up differently.
Right. Yeah, totally true. I mean, I was Lutheran. My dad's a pastor. I also thought it was kind of funny in your story. You talk about how your mom was like almost not going to get married to your dad because like, I can't, I was a pastor's kid. I don't want, and then it was like, okay, I guess we will. But so it's like, that's an important part.
Yeah, I know. Dude, saved our lives, because her not being that like traditional pastor's wife was really helpful, I will say. Yeah.
Because that was enormous amounts of pressure. And it's still really hard for me to extricate the performing that was expected of me as a family kid, like pastor's kid in that family structure, from me as a theater kid that actually does like to perform, and trying to figure out like, what if this is even real? Like, what happens if I'm not, but anyways, we were Lutheran, so we had more kind of the bland liturgy, but also culturally we're just I still feel like I'm basically might as well have been an evangelical. And it's like, the more I learn about Dobson or these other like patriarchs of a lot of evil things in the evil evangelical church, I was like, oh yeah, we just got watered down that. And you know, in terms of the little Christian pop that was out there, we would have been consuming it. I am very grateful I was not homeschooled past like kindergarten, so like I still was of the world, which has made it easier now.
Of the world,
very
but not
helpful,
in.
but not
or
in
wait,
the
in
world.
the world, but not of
it.
Yes.
Yeah, so I got to be in and of. But yeah, I did get some of that from my family. With like, maybe you should move back from California. It seems like you're getting ideas, and I was like,
Right. LA turned you trans. That's what happened.
I know. I was like, guys, it's not California, I promise. I'm just actually safe here. But anyways, so yes, wonderful. Let's see. That was a really great highlight. Let's jump into Rich People, because I think, like you were saying, what kind of makes the memoir stand out. I think it's a great hook. We love talking about rich people. But I also think you handle it really like carefully and well, because a lot of Christian culture is hating on rich people, despite the fact that many of them are doing very well. You have this whole story about like your work in Indonesia, right? And then like the people running it have their own like mansion and people working for them and all this stuff.
Compound. Yes.
Compound. Yeah. And
Yes.
I remember thinking about that. Like, we really were much more local with our mission trips. Like, I remember going to Pennsylvania for my first one, but I still,
A
even
mission
after,
trip in Texas.
yeah,
Like,
like,
I think they're
exactly.
fine.
Yeah. Well, and I remember like leaving for that weekend, I'd be like, so next week there'll just be another group of teens that come and hang out with these kids. Like, what is this system? What is this like, what are the finances? Like, even then there was like a question in my brain. But anyway, with so with rich people, we're taught like it's easier to get into heaven, you know, the eye camel through the eye of the needle than for rich men to get in heaven. There's a lot of negative talk, and this can be other cultural things too. It's not just Christians, but like a resentment towards rich people, like they must have sold their soul to be rich. Like, we have all these negative things, but also we kind of in America all hope that we can get to financial stability. Like, it's that great quote of like, the reason why we don't ever revolt is because we're all just temporarily scorned millionaires in our heads. So that's why, you know. So I think you do a really great job of like poking fun at like some of the things that stand out, you know, especially and we talked about this before, but your great quote about how you were an emotional support Midwesterner for a rich person. So there's the things that you can point out, of course, but you also don't treat them as like a whole nother species that is to kind of be laughed at. They're just, and what it kind of brought to my mind is like, this is a lot like Christianity. It's just a different group with their own rules and norms and their own language and their own like funny routines that they go through, you know? So can you talk a little bit about that in terms of why you think rich people were an important part of this story?
Yeah. I say in my verbal pitch, sort of during the part where I'm pitching to, potential investors about the reach that this would have in terms of an audience, because there's like the more niche audience of like even people who are raised evangelical or like religious or whatever, but then there's like the broader scope, which is God, sex, and rich people. These are America's evergreenly favorite topics, like religion, sex, and what the hell are rich people up to? And people we mock them. We blame them for everything wrong in the world, but then we also aspire to be them, right? Absolutely. So ultimately, a lot of it is like coming out of jealousy, like the must be nice kind of, and I had never met anyone truly like that closely until I moved to New York who was the must be nice. It's kind of like, if we're likening it to your point of the Christian subculture, it's like it's really easy to speak poorly about Muslim people or gay people or trans people until you know one. And then it's a little less okay, right? Or like, it's okay to make a racist joke. It's never okay to make a racist joke, but it's easier when there are no people of color around. But suddenly there are people of color around, and you're probably not going to say the thing that you might have not, like it confronts you with your ideas and your labels when it's not yet attached to a person.
Right. Yeah, it's that idea like a stereotype is just incomplete, so the more people you can't stereotype this, and certainly can't blame them for all your problems if you know.
Yes. And so that was really interesting, because I felt like, I think I have a line in the book where I say something like, my relationship with money was to villainize people who had it, but then always complain about not having enough. Like that was kind of how I was raised. And then but Colin, the character that I end up like living with in this very bizarro situation of like living in this penthouse that he inherited and all of that, had a very different relationship with money. And he and I still talk about that because we're still very good friends. And so it was just, again, going back to like the cartoonish nature of it all, looking back, that is for sure how I felt. I have this story that didn't make it into the book, but like my friend of mine got really drunk. Luckily, he's sober now because he was a monster when he drank. And I was bringing him back from a bar that was not even that far away from where I lived at the time. But he was, I had like punched him in the face because he was getting violent with me. Yeah, it was like a whole thing. And then I had to bring him back, and he was passed out in a cab. And so I had to like pull him out of the cab and into this fancy schmancy building. Okay, just imagine like the scene that I set of like this gorgeous lobby, no one in that building. It's like everyone in the building was like above 35 or below 7. Okay. I was the only one in my 20s. Everybody else was like old or a kid, right? And I'm like pulling in this like passed out drunk guy. And if I were in any other, well, not any other neighborhood, but like many other neighborhoods in New York, it would just be like, oh, another Saturday night. But I'm in this very specific Upper West Side, you know, like fancy schmancy building. And I literally had to like, I grabbed like one of my neighbor's sleds and like hauled him into the sled. And then like, oh, my light went out. And like had to pull him into my apartment. And I kept thinking like, I just hope none of my neighbors wake up, because if they do, like, I'm going to get kicked out of this building. Cause like I was a normal 20 something going through what normal 20 somethings do in their 20s. But in that, I would have been like the trashiest girl on campus, right? Like not allowed. This is unacceptable. This is not classy. And then sort of just like the revolving door of like men that I had that I had to be really secretive about, because I was living in this very specific environment and I wasn't always like successfully secretive about it. And then on top of that, you know, like it was weird because I was living in that world, but I was also working for these people. So there was this sense that like I was one of them, but absolutely not.
But also definitely not,
Yeah, like that. Like I would say to them, there are these series of details. This is very long-winded, so cut me off at any point. But there are these series of details that maybe you'll relate to being in Los Angeles, that if you say to a person, they immediately have assumptions about you. So like, number one, I went to French Woods, which is a very famous theater camp in the Northeast. Lots of rich kids go to French Woods. So that immediately would make people think, oh, she's from a wealthy family, or she's one of us, right? And I didn't know how to be like, no. I washed cars in the Walmart parking lot to raise money to go to that camp one time. I went one time, you know? And so that was a weird one. The other one was my brother went to USC, which was also a fluke. My brother applied to USC when he was like 16, got in, and then went to college a year early and got this like crazy scholarship because he's just really smart. And so we were not a family that like sent kids to USC. Like my parents didn't even know what USC was when Derek got in, you know? So that was another one. So people would have these assumptions about me. And then I lived on the Upper West Side. I lived on blah, 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 and blah, 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 the corner of, oh, I know that building. That's a great building, you know? And so they had all these, and I just didn't know how to be like, and then on top of all that, I'd be like, oh, and I'm a babysitter, you know, or, oh, and I'm a personal assistant. Oh, and I walk dogs. Like, so it was this very strange chameleon situation where I would like see people make assumptions about me, but then I almost like played into that a little bit because I got more jobs playing into that. I would be hired to nanny or to be a personal assistant because I like looked the part, if you will. Once I kind of like learned the lay of the land, for sure. At first I was just a fish out of water, but it was this really, it's like I learned these things about that culture, like, you know, rich people, every single holiday, every single time they're out of school, they go somewhere. They're going to Barbados. They're going to the Galapagos. They're going, you know, like they're always going somewhere. They're always traveling somewhere. Whereas like, man, my family didn't go on a vacation until I was like 8, and it was to Six Flags. You know, I didn't get on an airplane until I was 14. And, you know, so, and these things that these kids kind of like take for granted, or, you know, they all had babysitters. Like what? In where I'm from, the only time you had a babysitter is if your parents were going on a date night, and it was usually your grandparents. But here, you're doing extracurriculars all over the city. So if you have more than one kid, the dad is at work. Usually it's the dad or one of the parents, right? But usually it was the dad. The dad is at work. So the mom is taking one kid and they have to pay somebody else to take the other kid. That was not a cultural thing I was used to. That was kind of like, and also I just noticed like these kids have absolutely no imagination, privacy. they're hyper surveillanced. They had adults around them at all times, and they expected to be entertained. They did not entertain themselves. Like I found that to be really interesting. Like, and I'm not trying to shit talk, but, and this is obviously a generalization, but it was rare to meet families where the kids were able to just entertain themselves. Like I could take them to a playground and they would just go play. That wasn't the case for a lot. And a lot of those parents expected me to entertain their kids.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is actually just bad for their brains. Like they should have some like solo play, you know, they should be able to make their own fun. And you can tell the difference between a 4-year-old who knows how to play with other 4-year-olds and a 4-year-old who expects attention and all of the focus in a room of adults. And just what that to me was really interesting. Like these are the people we're electing for office. Like they're the ones going to Harvard and they don't even know how to or Harvard or Princeton or whatever Ivy League. And like, they don't even know how to encourage their kids to play on their own.
Yeah.
I don't like these kinds of things. There were a lot. And I hope in the TV show, because I couldn't do as much of it in the book, but I hope in the TV show that friction of social class will be very funny.
Yeah. And you can also kind of feel bad for them in a way too, even though they have all these things that we envy. Because they're expected to be super independent. I know you told the story about basically having like a live-in friend for one of the other rich people.
Oh yeah, live-in life coach.
Yeah,
that's what she was.
Yeah,
and she was undercover. She wasn't supposed to like.
Oh my
he wasn't
gosh.
supposed to know she was the life coach.
Yeah, I can't imagine. And I feel like it'd be very hard to self-motivate under those situations. You know, a lot of good things can come from having to work a little hard on things, but it's, you know, I'm not romanticizing that either. But yeah, it seems like there's also this parallel of like the things that we do and don't talk about as Christians, that they like, basically, like you said, with the lobby, it's like rich people don't have sex with, you know, it's like, of course they do. Like, but like there are these things. And then also I think sometimes, and I don't know how much this is broader culture versus these particular groups, but treating your children as like extensions of yourself. Like I always felt like my success only boiled down to the soundbite I could give a parent to then talk about me at church. Like that was my worth was, okay, I got, you know, a good job, I'm doing well, they can then say that I'm doing well versus how happy I actually am or whatever. But then I also realized too, I had a similar thing because I started working for a financial company out of college, and I was basically with, you know, it's like you said, over 30. So older people, rich people. And as someone in my 20s, it was kind of the lone one out in that way. I felt like I kind of didn't have the same, I guess it's a normal 20s in some ways, but yeah, they're their whole own thing. And I think with both groups, you can have people really only want to stay in that bubble. And so that can be kind of problematic in and of itself. I think as we've seen with evangelicalism in this country, like they don't want outside influence. They don't want new information. They're not like, oh, I wonder about that. It's like, no, we have the answers. We have our, you know, and so for people that I'm sad, I think, you know, went a different way with certain beliefs, I feel like they're the type of people that don't want new information or, like we said, information of the world or from other people. It's like, no, we already have, you know, our own little thing. We don't really want to venture outside of that. So
and for wealthy people, you're so right of all of those parallels. Absolutely. And for wealthy people, I found they were very, very private because they don't want people to know how wealthy they are. They don't want you to know actually how big the gap is, like, because it's tacky. It's tacky when most of America can't afford their groceries and you have a chef twice a week and you throw out most of your food because you literally can't eat this much food. You know, that's tacky. And you, like most people, can't afford to put gas in their cars to take their kids to school, but your kid goes to $50,000 a year TOOS program. That's tacky. So that's why they are so private, because they know it's not a good look right now in this economy. Like and that is another reason why they only hang out. Yeah. It's why they only hang out with other people in that bubble, because it doesn't feel good, probably, is my assessment. It doesn't feel good to be like, oh damn, everyone else is like really struggling and we've got 10 properties and the cheapest one is 3.15 million.
Yeah, but it's not liquid. It's not like,
Right.
as if that's really the difference there. Um,
Right.
yeah. Oh, that's a tricky one. Because you had a great stories about like having to do returns for rich people. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah, all of which I can't even. I get so many calls because I work the phone line at this beautiful museum, but I
God.
am still working a phone line, and we get calls from people.
Yeah.
I'm like, for over the tiniest little charges, and I'm like, do you have nothing better to do today? Like, at what point is your time worth more than this amount that you're trying to get back? Like, it's just people find different things to obsess over. But I also, I
Yeah.
had a time in my life where after I was done at that particular company, I had a lot of severance money. I had savings and stuff, and
Hmm.
I was basically out here in LA with lots of money, but I hadn't then pursued kind of the creative side. So I was like, I got to make up for
Hmm.
lost time. I now got to get my creative job. But it was really hard. It was like to,
Yeah.
kind of with all the time in the world, but also all this pressure. And it just kind of brought up all the things I then just really had to work on because I didn't feel like I was
Hmm.
allowed to have money. I was very generous. I would give it away all the time, but I didn't feel like as a young woman, I was allowed to just be good, let alone exceptional in what I had accessible to me. So
Mm.
I felt a lot of shame around the money, and then it just kind of magnified that I still felt like I needed to prove myself in however many other ways. So I'd love to be rich again.
Yeah.
I think I'll be way better at it this time, but it doesn't. It there really is that point where it's like if you
Famous
need from
last
me,
words,
yeah,
like
right.
every NBA player.
Yeah, this will do it. But it's like there really is that drop off point where like once your
Hmm.
needs are met, of course, happiness goes up to that point, and then the after that point, it kind of depends, I think, on how
Hmm.
much you've done kind of the work to either be able to put it towards things that'll be more fulfilling
Hmm.
versus what you think is fulfilling. But so I think it would in a lot of ways be very hard if I was just born rich and then had to deal with
Yeah.
all of that kind of cultural social pressure, which was icky enough as a pastor's kid that wasn't rich,
Hmm.
So it's like
Right.
I can
Right.
have
And
sympathy for it.
there are books about like the psychology of the silver spoon and
Mm,
like being a second generation kid, and I have read a lot of those books, and so I definitely, but at the end of the day, like rich kids and poor kids, many of them have the exact same problem, which is they just want love from their parents.
yeah, right.
That's really what it comes down to, and not having that approval. And a lot of, it's interesting because a lot of like rural, maybe not as wealthy people have kids because it's just what you're supposed to do. And
Mhm.
a lot of rich people have kids as accessories. They don't
Yep.
actually want to be parents.
Yeah.
So it's, but poor people do that too, but like for different reasons. And the difference, of course, with rich people is they have the resources to offload the parenting to
Right.
other people.
Yep.
The problem is that anytime you're in a situation where it's very clear, I actually didn't get hired from a nanny agency because I answered an interview question a little too honestly. But anytime you step into a family where it's very clear that the parents don't want to be parents,
Mm,
you are just set up to fail because it doesn't matter how much love you show those kids. It doesn't matter like what structure you put into their lives. They are just in a, like, you're just starting from so far in the negatives. You'll have
mm,
a better experience if you truly are like an added support and an extra set of hands. You're not replacing that parent role.
yeah.
And yeah, because it's those families are the worst to work for.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
tough. I saw a video the other day that helped kind of humanize this aspect of it too, where they're the moms that resent the women that don't have kids. It's like you don't know how
Yeah.
good you have it, but she kind of explained it from the side of I wasn't valued as a daughter. I wasn't even really super valued as a
Mm.
wife, but culturally as a mother, then suddenly you're in this valued class. And so I thought that was then going to make me feel like whole, but really, if you haven't gotten the chance to kind of become yourself and find who you are, then yeah, then we resent the women who are like in their 20s. They're like, I'm just going to figure out who I am and have fun and try things. And
Yeah.
then like you feel better because you're here, in a very different situation. So, of course, our country does not support and take care of mothers, and there's all this other stuff. But
Right.
yeah, I think there are a lot of us that are raised by people where it's like, did you even really want to have kids, or was this just the path? Because of course, that as a young woman, that's what I thought my path was like, yeah, I mean, I'll go to
Hmm.
college, but basically, it's just to get married and start having kids. So
Hmm.
that didn't happen. But there is just that pressure. That's just the path. That is the one thing
Yeah.
that you do, the way that you
Yeah.
feel like you can gain value. And I love there's a part of your book too where you talked about because you almost had a very big international you did have a big international love story, but it didn't
Yeah.
end up with moving abroad and getting married. But one thing you said, which I thought was so like so great at just like your ability to kind of analyze yourself, I guess, is just this idea that you were like, this would have made a really good end to that story. This, that it all worked out. Yes, I dated in New York for a while, but then it turned into this big. So there's still that, like, kind of like what I was saying, like the soundbite for the church people of like, that would have been a really good one, but I also would have given up like my entire life. And it sounds, good that you did it. So, but there is still that temptation of like, oh, you still, like, I don't know if that's just a Christian thing or if it's a lot of us thing of like wanting to have a good end to the story. And maybe that's even just how a lot of us kind of are raised to look at the Bible. Like, of course, there's some good, even if there's so much heinous stuff in the Bible, but there'll be a way that a Christian can tie it around with a bow and explain and connect to this thing and to try to, and then you get some distance from it and you're like, ugh, no, you just don't have, like, ugh.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
And I think for really truly with again, I don't want to like no spoilers, but with that relationship that you're mentioning, that was like crazy for me at the time. I really surprised myself because at the time I didn't have the status. I didn't have the good job. I didn't have the impressive career. Like the most impressive thing I'd done is like I got my equity card because I like was in a theater for young audiences tour that sucked. And it was, however, I will say the show itself was actually pretty fun, but the tour was awful and I didn't get paid that much, but I got to travel around the South and, I got my equity card. But no one back home knows what an equity card is. I always joke, like, I've written a book. I've produced like a couple of amazing short films. Like I have so many things that creatively I feel really, I was in that, this artistic incubator at Yale. I've won pitch competitions at Yale. Like I have all of these things I'm really proud of, but like I was in a BMW commercial and like, that is what people back home are so excited about. They're like, oh my God. But at that point and my joke is I just need to be in a Hallmark Christmas movie. So everyone back home knows I've
then
really
you just have that category completely set for life. Yes. You wouldn't have to think about that ever again. I totally get
it. But I didn't have any of that at the time, right? I was 26, 20,
an age when you should know everything and have it all together.
Right. I mean, most of my friends already had kids at that point. Like as a woman, your status is so attached to your relationship and your mother. Like, are you a mother? And so, or it's like, I remember I had this acting teacher who said, like, you have 3 choices as a woman to like be of value. It is like to be married and have kids, to have a really successful career, or to be rich. Like, and successful career doesn't always mean being rich. Successful career can be you've been in 4 Broadway shows. That doesn't mean you're rich, right? But, those are your choices. And if you don't have any of those, people really don't know what to do with you. They're like, wait, so what are you doing? Why are you still
they have to be the bucket thing?
Yeah, right. And so for me, Florine is his real name, Zorro in the book.
Yes.
What he was offering was so tantalizing, right? Because I was like, wow, I am going to get this like amazing love story. He's this incredible person. My parents still talk about Florine. They love him so much. And I was just like, I can't. Like, and the apartment I lived in was a piece of shit at the time. But like, I really just had this gut feeling that like, this is only just beginning for me. And my life is going to end if I go and do what he is asking of me. And it was not the right choice for me. And that was really hard. And because, like you're saying, it's like, people don't know where to place you. Even me now, like I have a book. I have all of these great, amazing, like kind of like creative irons in the fire. I do think that people take me more seriously because I'm partnered, because I'm in a long-term partnership.
That at least is the big question mark is,
Well, we're not married. We don't have kids, but like I am partnered, and like that somehow, and maybe that's a projection I have, but there is some sort of pressure I no longer feel about other things because I've got that.
Yeah, I feel like it implies a certain steadiness so that whatever you are pursuing seems more legitimate somehow than like, she's young and she's single and she's trying things. Good for her. I feel like I could see where you're, putting that in. I mean, we're just, supposed to be all these multi-hyphenates, but So I wanted to insert one silly thing, and then I want to get to some of your amazing quotes that relate to what you were just
Okay.
talking about. For
Yeah.
me, it is that I am technically part of the MCU, so that I can brag about that. I
Mm-hmm.
am in a scene.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, when I pursued that, because I always thought acting in LA was always my big dream, and then I started doing it, and I loved being on set. I loved extra work.
Uh-huh.
It was so easy. It was so fun. But I hated like recording monologue, memorizing monologues, self
Oh
tapes,
my
because this was
God.
post pandemic. I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
hate this so much. I would never want to. And then, for an actor, it would be incredible to get that commercial, and the amount of
Mm-hmm.
things you have to apply for and do and get turned down for to even get to the thing that, like, I could even imagine the people back home being like, oh yeah, you were in a commercial or something. It's like, even
Yeah.
like, if you really only build it based on what you think they will think of you, like, I mean, I just started seeing how much actors were like from big franchises were like, well, yeah, I need the work. Like, I don't
Yeah.
have a job. And you're like, wait, but you
Yeah.
just did this huge thing. And I was like, I don't want that life personally. I don't want that life. And I
No.
just fell in love with my writing. So, but I just do think it's kind of
Yeah.
funny to think of, like, oh yeah, I do have those things I can brag about.
One of my favorite fun facts is that I do get SAG residuals. I'm not SAG, but I get
Nice.
SAG residuals from this one
Congrats.
movie that I booked. This is such a crazy story. I was in Italy and I had filmed the audition before I went to Italy. Very small part, maybe 4 scenes, right? And I filmed my audition, and then I'm in Italy, like, and they ask, "Can I do a callback?" And I'm like, it's like, and it's like my last night in Rome,
Yeah.
and I have to go back to my hotel to fucking film this callback with the
Hated it.
creative
Hated
team,
it
with
so
the
much.
whatever. And I did it, and I'm glad that I did, because I did book it, and it was a Lionsgate film. And so I had a trailer, I had my SAG like
Mm-hmm.
credit, whatever. I'm getting my residuals, but it was a faith-based film
Aw.
called Unsung Hero. It premiered alongside Dune 2.
Oh, okay. The
And
Barbenheimer of its day.
right. It actually did pretty well in the box office. But the guys who did it are Luke and Joel Smallbone. They're of King and Country. They're like a
Okay.
country music Australian duo. Anyway, the whole movie is about the Christian music industry. And I was reading the script and I was like, you have got to be kidding me. Like, my biggest credit, I book a Lionsgate film and it's a fucking faith-based film.
Yeah.
But whatever. They cut my scenes probably for the better. Lots of
Oh
problematic people in that movie.
no.
And which was pretty devastating, because I was like excited to see myself on the big screen,
Yeah, for real.
And then I got there and I was like, my scenes are cut, and I was pretty devastated. But now in hindsight, I'm glad that happened, because I still get the residuals and no one associates me with that
With
movie.
it. Best of both worlds. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean, and it brings up a good point though about happiness, where like you can't do it for the people back home, and you also can't do it for the people in your new situation, because you could book the next Lionsgate thing, and there could be plenty of people in New York or LA who are like, okay, well, what are you doing now? Like it's
It never
the hedonic
ends.
treadmill of it. You have to. So I think that's where, as creative people, we know for our own internal heart of like, am I really pushing myself creatively, and am I really like making stuff that I'm proud of? And then if we can get work in these other ways, amazing. But to not only do it like, I will be valuable when, or this will then, that kind of stuff is important to remember. But I did want to jump to a couple of your quotes that I really liked, with kind of the things we were talking about. So in terms of facing uncertainty and leaving things behind and going to the new things, you have this great quote about, these were my rubble years, the years of constantly knocking shit down, but not yet having the understanding to rebuild. So I was just kind of sitting on top of the spiritual, mental, and emotional rubble. How relatable. Can totally understand that. And then I think we might have said this before we started recording, so I'll just kind of repeat it. But the idea that even after this, you then wanted to tell everyone about what you had deconstructed. It kind of still had that proselytizing gene to want to tell everyone about it. I totally understand. And I think we have it in like, the queer community too, where it's like you kind of make it your whole personality for a while, but it's because you found a new home in a new community. You left behind one that wasn't as healthy for you. And so then you want to talk to everyone about it. And yeah, I mean, especially with deconstruction and with how it relates to women and living in a culture that is so misogynistic, I wanted to like go to the women and family and be like, you need to listen to this. You can't.
Yeah.
And so ironically, I was also kind of starting to transition, but I still just wanted to be like, you shouldn't hate yourself. You shouldn't hate your body. And there was all these things I was learning. Because we're just raised with so much shame on top of shame on top of shame. So, but you have to have the kind of the courage to go to unfamiliar territory. And to quote another line of yours, my faith was not part of my life. It was my life. It was not part of me. It was me. So no wonder people find it very difficult to change anything about this. It's your whole identity. And I feel like I've had to do that multiple times, and it's not easy. Like your whole rubric for life is
you have literally changed your identity
many times. Yeah.
In the most literal way.
Literal way. Like, don't even say the old name. In some ways that helps, but it's like, but yeah, I mean, I found that like even more so than religion, my family was basically my religion, and that family structure and the enmeshment and the having to have that perfect front. And so I'm much more about authenticity because I know what kind of like the fake church front is about and how much we sacrifice to pretend everything was perfect all the time. But it can be a little lonely and scary to feel like, okay, I've said, you know, no to all this other stuff, but what am I saying yes to now? What do I believe in? And so that's where like, I think a lot of this podcast was like, I want to talk about shame, and I want to talk about how awful it is and the way that we raise women to hate their bodies. And I'll get into one more quote that I think is so important to what we were talking about too. Like there's stuff we got to talk about. There's shame about being a woman. There's shame about sex. There's shame about just general, I'm, you know, poor, miserable sinner. It's so much to peel apart, and it is all connected. But you have this wonderful quote that I'm still really working on, despite having started my deconstruction a long time ago, about severance from our bodies. You said, my body is so smart and she should be listened to intently. And you also have these great stories where you kind of talk about like, this is what I was thinking in the moment, but I also feel like I had this like future me kind of seeing the moment as well. Do you want to talk about that for a minute? Just an idea of learning to trust your body. Cause I still feel like I struggle with like, what do I actually want in this moment? And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't even know.
Yeah. The dissociation is so strong, because that's basically, I think I say also in the book, like the antidote to the indoctrination of evangelicalism is integration. It is integration of self. It is integration of body, because all you're taught is, right, it's that whole theology of the spirit versus the flesh. Like there's this part of you that's good and there's part of you that's really bad, and you have to like really resist the flesh, really resist sin,
don't trust your body,
resist. And your heart is deceptive, right? Like anything that is of you is bad. Anything that, and you just need to supplant all of that with whatever quote unquote scripture says, which scripture, of course, is whomever leader is telling you scripture means. I'm rereading parts of the Bible right now with a friend. We're going through Aaron Moon's journal. I've got questions journal. And I read some of these stories and I'm like, why does anyone other than like biblical scholars get to teach this? Because I read some of these passages and I'm like, I've read 3 sentences and I have so many questions. Like, it just doesn't make any sense if you don't have strong context. So like, why are we letting some fucking idiot with an associate's degree teach me about the Bible? Like,
I remember I was a preschool teacher or Sunday school teacher and being like, why are we making this story 3-year-old sized? Like, this is not appropriate. I don't feel right about this. It should not be in like 15-point font. Like,
and like even this, I just recently read the story of Jonah for the first time, like actually read it, and I was like, too many questions. Like, and I read the story of like the woman at the well. I read the story of the woman at the well, and my friend who I'm doing this study with was not raised religious, and we both kind of came to the same conclusion that we're like, why is Jesus like mansplaining to this woman? Which like this specific story is always like, wasn't Jesus so great? He was using a woman. He didn't hate women like most of us do. And I'm like, he kind of sounds like a dick in this story. Like, but maybe I'm missing something. There's probably some context that I don't know, which is why it's important for biblical scholars to exist. Anyway, totally tangential. Where was I going with that?
Trusting your body.
Trusting your body. You're just, so much of it is you go immediately. It's like, evangelicalism is just like doubles down on that teaching, but American culture in general teaches you to like bypass your body at all times, right? And so it's just this sort of like double whammy of like, what the hell? And I think I had so many, and I'm very honest about this both in podcast interviews and in my book that like I was having a lot of sex in my 20s, but I wasn't having good sex. I was having a lot of dissociated sex. I was having, I say like, I wanted to have sex in the abstract.
Yeah, the idea, because it's certainly built
the
up,
idea
right?
of it sounded nice, you know,
Yeah.
but like then when I would actually get in it and my body would be revolting and I would be like, no, I don't actually want to do this, but I felt like I had to make up for lost time.
Yeah.
And then there were so many situations where I would try to speak up for myself and then just be like not listened to. And there were just, I did it. I had no tools. Yeah. And so a big part of this sort of like rebuilding, reconstructing was listening to what I actually wanted in the moment, not numbing out with alcohol. Yeah. That was a big piece of like my dating experience and my deconstruction was, or reconstruction, if you will, was to not get as drunk on every single date. Like actually maybe just have one drink or don't have any drinks because maybe I just need to be like fully present with this guy to see if I really am attracted to him or if like we're vibing in that way. And instead of sort of just throwing myself into the situation in a very risky way. And I just there now. I mean, I've been in a relationship for like four years now, right? But before that, I just got to a place where if it wasn't a hell yes, it was a hell no, where like I just didn't even, I was so clear with men. Like I didn't even let it be a question mark of where I stood on things. And Ken, my now partner, will tell you like he loved that about me. I think it was like date 2. And I was like, we should talk about sex. And he was like, great, let's talk about it. And I was like, don't make the move. Like, don't make the move. I will make the move when I am ready. And you will know. There will be no confusion over when I am ready. I will both say it with my words and with my body. So there will be no confusion on your end. And it wasn't very sexy, but I just like had to be that way. So important. Because I just didn't, I was like self-preservation and protection because there were just too many moments that I got in where, you know, we'd be at their apartment and we'd be making out and I would be clear that I didn't want to go past a certain point, but like these guys just weren't listening and they weren't hearing it and they would keep trying to like push. And I was just like, okay, then this is just how it has to be. But yeah, I don't think we're taught that. And so I don't think we aren't taught that. And I think the temptation when you're raised in a very religious, a highly religious environment, there's this tendency to sort of fall back on the self-fulfilling prophecies. Like, well, you had these bad experiences with sex because you didn't wait until marriage. See, this is what happens when you don't wait until marriage. And it's like, well, no, that's not what happens just because I didn't wait until marriage. There are a myriad of other things. I didn't have education. I don't know how to listen to myself. I don't have any boundaries. I don't, you know, like there are so many things that this is why this happens. Also, let's not just put it on the woman. There's a bunch of patriarchal conditioning that men undergo to get them to a place where they feel entitled to our bodies, right? So all of these things that are far more complex, it's much easier to your point earlier, wrap it up in a bow and say, if you just wait until marriage, but and so I didn't want to do that because I had a lot of that narrative in my head. Oh, this is what happens when you don't wait until marriage. This is what, you know, and it's like, no, actually there are a lot more layers and a lot more nuance to it than that. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, for sure. There's so many good things. I know we're running out of time, so maybe we could sit down again because I really wanted to go into a couple of stories from your book in particular and how all of that like mess is so clear and so well told. But I guess just to kind of still cover a couple other things. I do still want to recommend Pure. I know you talk about that book too, and I've talked about it on this podcast. I was so upset when I read that book because I was like, oh, it's all really well documented. She already did the research. We know this is bad.
Mhm.
We know the
Yeah.
harm it causes. And I was just thinking, like, so I don't need to go then write this book and save the day because it's already out there and people just decide whether or not they care. But that tells
Yeah.
the story of like even the people that waited till marriage, they get to their wedding night and they're like, what do we do now? And they still
Yeah.
have these unsatisfying, uncomfortable sex lives. And it's so much to unlearn,
Yes.
just even in your body. So that I think is a good kind of just book for that topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just and to the topic of like rape culture too. It's like men aren't supposed to want to be with a woman that wants to have sex with them. Like that is literally like that is the opposite of that is rape. So it's just this really weird messed up thing. And so I know before I ever got into these woke topics, I loved the like 2 scenes in all of pop culture where there was a woman that was actually had like a sexual desire and was communicating it. And usually it was because she had to play a character that had, that or whatever. But I was like, there's something about this I really like. And it was because of a woman actually being able to be like, oh, I want to, and I want that. I have a whole nother movie I wanted to kind of talk about that drives me crazy on that stereotype, but maybe we'll put a pin in that for part 2. But yeah, there was this still this kind of inner knowing about something here that I hadn't seen in other places, and I think you do a really good job of it in the stories I'd love to dive deeper into, of being like I said, there's what I knew in the moment, and then there was also this kind of future knowing that was kind of letting me know like something about this is wrong, and it's not just that I'm a bad sinner and things like that. There's like your inner truth that was like, no, girl, that was messed up. Like you deserve to feel valued. So like I said, we'll put a pin in that, but I did want to jump real quick onto some of your hilarious posts. So one thing you had said about like trusting your gut versus, listening to what God's telling us to do. You have a funny version of that in your Christianese videos, if you want to tell us about those really quick. But where it's like, this was on our hearts, or like, I hated when my parents would be like, oh, we're accepting the call. Like God's telling us we're going to move. And I was like, didn't you guys just decide that? Like, what are we really talking? Like, even as a kid who
we're still
so far from deconstruction, I was still like, this seems like something adults are saying to cover for the fact that they decided. But yeah, could you tell us a little bit about your Christianese videos? And then I'll make sure to link people so that they get to see those funny videos. Because that's how I found you. And then read your book and loved it. So it's a great way to connect.
Love that. So TBH, I have such a reluctance. I have had such a reluctance to social media for such a long time because I've been kind of like a curmudgeon boomer about it. Like the internet isn't what it used to be, and like I built my following from scratch, like, and I didn't have to make any of these reels, and it's so time consuming, and it's so technical. Like being a good writer doesn't translate to like being an influencer. Like I had all of these things, right? So like, and honestly, when I was looking for a publisher, I kept getting that over and over and over. You have a very strong voice, you have a very compelling story, but you don't have enough Instagram followers. And I was like, that's so annoying because I can rant about this for forever because all of these people who were making videos while I was writing a book now have freaking publishing deals with Penguin Random House, and like making videos doesn't mean you can write a good book. Right. That being said, Brian Recker's book is very good and I highly recommend it.
Oh yeah, I read that. Yeah, I read that one too. It's a good one. But I'm in the exact same boat because I'm like, do I want to spend the next year building up a following or writing? And I think that's where I can kind of romanticize, like, I want to get better at my craft. It's like, okay, but then this is ways where people can like actually connect with other creatives and make amazing things happen. So I'm literally at that exact split in my brain right now of like, how much time do I want to spend getting better at social media versus, kind of this idealized version of like, I certainly don't want to imply that I'm like too good for it, but I also know that there are a lot of artists who are like, I want to spend my time making my art, not making content about my art. And so it's this definitely, and then also people can work really hard on it and then the algorithm changes. And so it's like, and how much do you kind of pour in all this effort? So I totally get it, but thankfully you did it really, and you did make social media.
Yeah, I know you have to go, but like really quickly. So basically I wrote my book. That's a whole other topic. Maybe we can cover in another interview, but I finally was like, now I'm trying to, get, a production team and network behind my TV show. And so I was like, all right, whether I want to or not, I'm going to have to translate some of this over to social media and I'm going to have to get a following because no network is going to look at me if I don't have at minimum 50,000 followers. So like, that is so frustrating because I've worked so hard. I've doubled my following in the last 2 months and that has taken like, and I'm still not even to like 10,000 followers. And I'm like, I'm just waiting. I'm like, okay, this week I can get to 10,000
Yeah.
followers, you know? And so, so that's frustrating, but that is the reality of turning craft into commercial work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's creating and then there is selling.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Absolutely.
you know, these things, there's like once your writing becomes a book, it's a business. Like you have to, you know, sell it, whatever.
Yeah.
So I've done things very out of order, but I'm grateful for the path that I've been on for it. And it's been, you know, the trajectory that it's been has been right for me. And so that is why I started making these videos, because I was like, what's something I can do based on content in my book that will be very shareable and very relatable? Because that's really what it comes down to with Instagram to get a lot of eyeballs is people need to see themselves in your video or in your post. If they relate to it, they will share it. They will send it to other people. They will like it. They will follow you. And so that's where the Christianese videos came up. And what I do is I sort of like write a lot of them down as they come up and then I'll film. But then even with the footage that I have, sometimes it turns into something different. So I just kind of like I still have a lot of footage on my phone that I need to like edit videos from. But that's why I started doing that series. And that's been the series that has, it's like that and like Overheard at the Potter's House, which is the series I do where I kind of mock like Christian women and all of the things that they say. Those videos have done really, really well. Yeah, so that's just kind of my strategy right now. And but I'm glad it's working.
It's worked. Yeah, absolutely. Here we are today. So
Yeah.
we're definitely cheering for you as you get to that 10K and beyond. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here with me today. I really would love to sit down another time if you'd like, because this
Please.
stuff is this is like right into the core of what I'm most passionate about and why I wanted to start the podcast to talk about, you know, a lot of the stuff that comes up in your amazing stories. But we're going to link everything down below in terms of your page, your book, the YouTube as well, the promo. I love that. And also feel free to just send me any other links you have if you're like, oh, this article was really helpful, or this book, you know, like I'm sure we've read a lot of the same deconstruction stuff as well. So
yes.
Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and hopefully we'll talk again soon. So thank you.
Yes, sounds great. Thanks, Marcus.
We'll catch up with everyone on the next episode of Holy Unapologetic.